The sun cast long shadows across the dusty trail as Lillian Owens stared at her beloved paint horse, now lying motionless beneath the sprawling branches of a juniper tree. Tears streamed down her dirt-smudged face as she knelt beside the faithful companion who had carried her for countless miles across the untamed West. 3 days of travel, with barely any water, had been too much for the poor animal. Now, 20 miles from the nearest settlement, with no water, no shelter, and night approaching fast, Lillian faced the grim reality that she might share her horse's fate. The year was 1877, and the Idaho Territory was as beautiful as it was treacherous. Lillian had set out from Boise City with high hopes of reaching Snake River to start her new position as the town's schoolteacher before the autumn term began. At 23, she had embraced the opportunity to leave behind the painful memories of her parents' deaths and the farm she could no longer maintain alone. "I am so sorry, Maple," she whispered, running her fingers through the horse's mane one final time. "You were the best horse a woman could ask for." Lillian gathered what supplies she could carry from her saddlebags, a canteen, with barely a sip of water left, some hardtack, her father's pocket watch, a small Derringer pistol, and the letter offering her the teaching position. The rest she would have to leave behind. Her trunk containing her books and most of her clothing would remain strapped to the saddle. Perhaps someone would find them and put them to good use. As she hoisted her meager belongings onto her shoulder, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her freeze. Out here, alone and vulnerable, a stranger could mean salvation or something far worse. Lillian's hand moved instinctively to the Derringer tucked in her skirt pocket. The Idaho Territory might be more civilized than it was during the gold rush days, but danger still lurked in these remote areas. The rider appeared over the ridge, silhouetted against the fiery orange sunset. He rode tall in the saddle, the brim of his hat pulled low, a bandana covering the lower half of his face against the dust of the trail. A typical cowboy by all appearances, but Lillian knew better than to make assumptions. The stranger slowed his chestnut stallion as he approached, taking in the scene: the dead horse, the abandoned trunk, the woman standing defiantly despite the fear evident in her eyes. "Evening, madam," he called, his voice deep and cautious as he pulled down his bandana. "Looks like you've had some bad luck." "My horse," Lillian replied, straightening her spine. She couldn't take the heat. "I'm headed to Snake River." The man dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his tall, lean frame. He approached slowly, hands visible to show he meant no harm. As he came closer, Lillian could see his face clearly weathered from years under the sun, with kind blue eyes that crinkled at the corners and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. "That's a mighty long walk from here," he said, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair. "Especially with night coming on. Name's Gabriel Irving. Most folks call me Gabe." "Lillian Owens," she replied, her voice steadier than her nerves. "I'm the new school teacher." Gabriel nodded, glancing at the darkening sky. "School's expecting you then?" "Yes, term starts in a week." He studied her for a moment, then turned to look at her dead horse and the trunk still secured to its back. Without a word, he moved to the animal and began unfastening the straps. "What are you doing?" Lillian asked, taking a step forward. "Can't leave your belongings out here," Gabriel answered, heaving the trunk off the horse with a grunt. "Coyotes will be coming soon, and there's been talk of bandits in these parts." He secured the trunk to his own horse, which snorted and shifted under the added weight. Then Gabriel turned back to Lillian with a seriousness that made her heart skip. "Miss Owens, I can't rightly leave you out here alone, and that's too much weight for my horse to carry the both of us in your trunk." He patted his stallion's neck. "This is Rusty. He's a good steady mount. I'd like you to take him." Lillian's eyes widened. "Take your horse? But how will you—" "I'll walk beside you to Snake River," Gabriel said matter-of-factly. "It's a hard journey, but I know these trails well enough. We should make it by tomorrow evening if we travel through the cool of the morning." "I can't possibly accept—" "You can and you will," Gabriel interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "No decent man would leave a lady stranded out here. Besides," he added with a small smile, "I've got business in Snake River myself. Was heading there anyway." Before Lillian could protest further, Gabriel had arranged a makeshift camp beneath the juniper tree, using branches to create a small shelter. He started a modest fire with practiced efficiency. the flames casting dancing shadows across his determined face. "We'll rest here tonight," he explained, pulling provisions from his saddlebags. "Start fresh at first light." As they sat across from each other, sharing his jerky and coffee, Lillian studied the cowboy. There was something honest about his face, a steadiness in his movements that spoke of reliability. "What business do you have in Snake River, Mr. Irving?" she asked. "Cattle," he replied. "I work for the Sundance Ranch north of here. The boss sent me to negotiate some grazing rights with farmers near the river." "And your boss won't mind you lending out his horse?" Gabriel chuckled. "Rusty's mine. Bought him with my first season's wages 3 years back." He took a sip of coffee. "What brings a young woman like yourself out to these parts alone?" "Teaching positions must be plentiful back east." Lillian's gaze dropped to the fire. "I needed a fresh start. My parents died last winter influenza. The farm couldn't sustain itself with just me, and She paused, surprised at herself for sharing so much with a stranger. "I've always wanted to teach. This seemed like an opportunity." Gabriel nodded, not pressing further. "Idaho's a good place for new beginnings." The night grew cold as the fire died down, and despite her exhaustion, Lillian found sleep elusive. She lay wrapped in the blanket Gabriel had insisted she take, watching the stars through gaps in the juniper branches, conscious of the cowboy's presence just a few feet away. He had positioned himself between her and the open trail, his rifle within easy reach, a guardian she hadn't asked for but was grateful to have. Morning came with a palette of pinks and golds streaking the eastern sky. Lillian awoke to find Gabriel already up, tending to Rusty and preparing a simple breakfast of more jerky and hard biscuits. "Not much, I'm afraid," he apologized, handing her a share. "It's more than I had," she replied with a grateful smile. Once they had eaten and packed up the camp, Gabriel helped Lillian onto Rusty's back. The horse was larger than her paint, and she felt precariously high as she settled into the saddle. "He's steady as they come," Gabriel assured her, adjusting the stirrups to fit her shorter legs. "Just give him a gentle hand and he'll treat you right." With the trunk secured behind her, they set off as the sun cleared the horizon. Gabriel walked alongside, one hand occasionally resting on Rusty's bridle. Lillian couldn't help but notice the easy way he moved, seemingly unbothered by the prospect of walking 20 miles in boots clearly designed for riding. As the morning progressed and the temperature rose, Lillian became increasingly concerned about her companion. "We could take turns," she suggested. "I could walk for a while." Gabriel shook his head, a smile playing at his lips. "Miss Owens? I've been working cattle since I was 14. I've walked more miles than I care to count. You keep that saddle warm." They traveled in companionable silence, broken occasionally by Gabriel pointing out landmarks or sharing snippets of local history. By midday, the sun beat down mercilessly, and they stopped in the shade of a rock formation to rest and share the last of the water. "Tell me about Snake River," Lillian said, as they sat side by side, seeking relief from the heat. "What kind of place is it?" "Growing," Gabriel replied. "Used to be just a trading post, but with the railroad coming through, it's becoming a proper town. They've got a general store, a church, even a small hotel now." He glanced at her with a smile. "And soon they'll have a schoolhouse with a proper teacher." "I hope I'm up to the task," Lillian admitted, voicing her doubts for the first time. "Some of the students will be nearly my age." "You'll do fine," Gabriel said with such conviction that Lillian almost believed him. "Takes courage to come out here alone. That'll earn you respect." As they continued their journey through the afternoon, the terrain became more challenging. The trail narrowed, winding through rocky outcroppings and steep inclines. Gabriel moved ahead at times, scouting the path, always returning to guide Rusty through the difficult passages. During one such moment, as they navigated a particularly treacherous stretch, Rusty's hoof slipped on loose gravel. The horse neighed in alarm, rearing slightly. Lillian, caught off guard, felt herself sliding from the saddle. In an instant, Gabriel was there, strong arms catching her before she hit the ground. Time seemed to suspend as she found herself pressed against his chest, his heart pounding beneath her palm. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. "I've got you," he murmured, his breath warm against her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, suddenly aware of how inappropriate their proximity was, and yet unable to pull away immediately. Gabriel set her gently on her feet, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary before he stepped back, clearing his throat. "We should keep moving if we want to reach town before dark." The remainder of the afternoon passed in a different kind of silence, charged with an awareness that hadn't been there before. Lillian found herself watching Gabriel more closely, the set of his shoulders, the way his hand occasionally brushed back his hair, the profile of his face when he looked to the horizon. As the sun began its descent, they crested a rise, and Gabriel pointed ahead. "There it is, Snake River." In the distance, Lillian could make out buildings clustered along the winding river that gave the town its name. Smoke rose from chimneys, and even from here, she could see people moving about, going about their evening routines. "We made it," she breathed, a mixture of relief and trepidation washing over her. This would be her home now, these people her neighbors and the parents of her future students. Gabriel nodded, a strange expression crossing his face. "We did." They approached the town as twilight settled, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. People stopped to stare as they passed a woman riding a fine chestnut stallion, a dust-covered cowboy walking beside her, both looking trail-worn but determined. "The school board president is Mr. Thornton," Lillian said, recalling the letter in her pocket. "Do you know where I might find him?" "He owns the general store," Gabriel replied, pointing to a 2-story building at the town center. "Lives above it with his wife." As they reached the store, lights glowed from within and a bell jingled as Gabriel opened the door for Lillian. Inside, a portly man with mutton chop whiskers looked up from behind the counter. "Well, I'll be," he said, squinting at them. "Gabriel Irving, that you? And who's this you've brought to town?" "Mr. Thornton, this is Miss Lillian Owens," Gabriel said, removing his hat. "Your new school teacher." Recognition dawned on the storekeeper's face. "Miss Owens, we'd about given up on you. Term starts next Monday, you know." "I apologize for my delay," Lillian said, stepping forward. "My horse died on the trail. If not for Mr. Irving, I might not have made it at all." Thornton's eyebrows shot up. "That so?" He looked at Gabriel with newfound respect. "Well, that's mighty decent of you, Irving." "Anyone would have done the same," Gabriel replied modestly. "Not everyone, son, not everyone." Thornton turned his attention back to Lillian. "The school teacher's quarters aren't quite ready yet. We didn't expect you until the weekend, but Mrs. Thornton and I would be pleased to have you stay with us until then." "That's very kind," Lillian said gratefully. As they made arrangements for her accommodations, Gabriel remained by the door, hat in hand, looking increasingly out of place. When Thornton called for his wife to prepare a room, Lillian turned to find Gabriel edging toward the exit. "You're leaving?" she asked, unable to mask her disappointment. "Best get Rusty settled at the livery," he replied, "and I need to find a place to bunk down myself." "Stay for supper at least," Mrs. Thornton insisted, appearing from the back room. "It's the least we can do after you helped our teacher." Gabriel hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, madam. I'll just see to my horse first." As he stepped out into the night, Lillian felt a strange emptiness. In just one day, this man had become important to her in ways she couldn't quite articulate. She wondered if she would see him again before he returned to his ranch. Mrs. Thornton showed Lillian to a small but comfortable room above the store, providing a basin of warm water and clean towels so she could wash away the dust of the trail. As Lillian changed into her one clean dress, saved carefully in her trunk for her arrival, she found herself wondering what Gabriel might think when he saw her looking more presentable. The thought startled her. What did it matter what a cowboy thought of her appearance? He had been kind, certainly, even heroic, but their paths had crossed by chance and would soon diverge again. She was here to teach, to build a new life for herself, not to dwell on fleeting encounters with handsome strangers. Yet, when she descended the stairs to find Gabriel cleaned up as well, his hair still damp from washing, wearing a fresh shirt someone had loaned him, her heart quickened traitorously. Supper was a lively affair, with the Thorntons eager to hear about their journey and to share all the news of Snake River. Lillian learned that the town had recently completed its first proper church, that a railroad spur was planned for the coming year, and that her school currently had 27 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Throughout the meal, she was acutely aware of Gabriel across the table, his quiet presence a contrast to Mr. Thornton's boisterous conversation. Occasionally their eyes would meet, and he would offer a small smile before returning his attention to his plate. "Where will you be staying while in town, Mr. Irving?" Mrs. Thornton asked as she served apple pie for dessert. "The livery stable has a cot I can use," Gabriel replied. "I don't plan to be here more than a few days." "Nonsense," Thornton interjected. "We've got a spare room above the storeroom. Nothing fancy, but better than bedding down with the horses." Gabriel started to protest, but Thornton waved him off. "Considerate payment for delivering our teacher safely. I was beginning to think we'd have to delay the start of term." Later, as Lillian prepared for bed in her temporary quarters, she found herself drawn to the window overlooking the main street. The town was quiet now, most windows dark, but a light still burned in the livery stable. She watched as a figure Gabriel moved about, no doubt checking on Rusty one last time before retiring. The next morning brought sunshine and a flurry of activity as the Thorntons introduced Lillian to what seemed like every resident of Snake River. She met the mayor, the town doctor, the blacksmith, and countless parents who scrutinized her with varying degrees of approval. By midday, her head was spinning with names and faces. "Where is the schoolhouse?" she asked Mrs. Thornton as they walked back from visiting the dressmaker, who had promised to have 2 new teaching dresses ready by the weekend. "Just past the church," Mrs. Thornton replied. "Would you like to see it now?" Mr. Thornton gave me the key. The schoolhouse was a simple white clapboard building with a bell tower standing proudly at the edge of town. Inside, rows of desks faced a larger teacher's desk on a raised platform. Bookshelves lined one wall, sparsely filled with worn primers and readers. "It's not much," Mrs. Thornton apologized, "but the town council has approved funds for more books." "It's perfect," Lillian said honestly, already envisioning how she would arrange the room, what lessons she would plan first. This was her domain, her new beginning. As they explored the building, the sound of hammering drew them to the back, where a small structure was being added to the schoolhouse. "Your living quarters," Mrs. Thornton explained. "Mr. Thornton sent word to the carpenter this morning to hurry the work along." Outside, several men were busy with construction. Among them, to Lillian's surprise, was Gabriel, shirt sleeves rolled up, driving nails with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Irving," she called, stepping through the partially completed doorway. "I didn't expect to find you here." Gabriel looked up, wiping sweat from his brow. "Miss Owens, just lending a hand while I wait on some farmers to return to town." His eyes held hers. "Figured you might want to move into your own place sooner rather than later." "That's very thoughtful," she said, warmth spreading through her chest at his consideration. "We should be finished by tomorrow," he added, returning to his work. Lillian watched him for a moment longer before Mrs. Thornton gently steered her away to continue their tour of the town. That evening, after another shared meal at the Thorntons, Gabriel offered to walk Lillian back to the schoolhouse so she could see the progress on her quarters. The night was clear, stars blanketing the sky above them as they strolled side by side down the quiet street. "You seem at home here already," Gabriel observed as they walked. "The town has taken to you." "Everyone has been very welcoming," Lillian agreed, "though I suspect they're simply relieved to have a teacher at all." Gabriel chuckled. "Don't sell yourself short. You're going to make a fine teacher." "And what about you?" Lillian asked. "Will you return to your ranch once your business is concluded?" A shadow crossed his face. "That's the plan, though I admit Snake River has unexpected attractions." The way he looked at her as he said it made Lillian's pulse quicken. They had reached the schoolhouse, and by unspoken agreement, they sat on the steps leading up to the front door. "Tell me about your ranch," Lillian said, eager to know more about this man who had so dramatically entered her life. Gabriel gazed up at the stars. "It's not mine exactly. I work for Mr. Sundance. Been with him 3 years now." He paused. "But I've been saving. There's a piece of land about 10 miles from here, along the river. Good grazing, good water. I've had my eye on it. You want your own ranch?" "Every cowboy's dream," he said with a small smile. "Place to call my own, cattle with my brand on them." He glanced at her. "Maybe a family someday." The word family hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. "What about you?" Gabriel asked after a moment. "Is teaching your calling, or just a way to make a living?" "Both, I suppose," Lillian replied thoughtfully. "I've always loved learning, sharing knowledge. My mother was a teacher before she married my father. She smiled at the memory. She taught me to read from the family Bible when I was 4 years old, said I was too curious to wait for school. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. Lillian's throat tightened. I hope I can honor her memory here. Gabriel's hand found hers in the darkness, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. You will. The touch was innocent, comforting, yet it sent a jolt through Lillian that had nothing to do with grief or memory. She should pull away. They were virtually strangers, after all, but she couldn't bring herself to break the connection. They sat in silence for a long while, hands joined, each lost in their own thoughts, yet somehow more present in the moment than Lillian could remember being in months. Finally, Gabriel sighed and rose to his feet, helping Lillian up. It's getting late. I should see you back to the Thorntons. The walk back was quieter, a comfortable silence broken only by the occasional comment about the town or the stars or the coolness of the evening air. When they reached the store, Gabriel tipped his hat in farewell. Good night, Miss Owens. Good night, Mr. Irving, she replied, lingering at the door. And thank you for everything. His smile in response was soft, almost sad. My pleasure, madam. The next 2 days passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Lillian's quarters were completed, a simple bedroom, small sitting area, and kitchen attached to the back of the schoolhouse. The Thorntons helped her move in her trunk and gifted her with basic furnishings, while other townspeople contributed household items. Mrs. Peterson from the bakery brought curtains, the blacksmith's wife offered pots and pans, and the doctor's daughter delivered a bouquet of wildflowers for her table. Throughout it all, Lillian caught only glimpses of Gabriel. He seemed busy with his own affairs, meeting with farmers at the saloon, inspecting cattle at nearby homesteads. Each time she saw him in town, he would tip his hat politely, but the easy conversation of their journey and the night on the schoolhouse steps seemed to have evaporated. On her third evening in Snake River, as Lillian arranged books on the schoolroom shelves in preparation for Monday's classes, a knock at the door interrupted her work. Opening it, she found Gabriel standing there, hat in hand. Mr. Irving, she said, surprised. Please come in. He stepped inside, looking around at the transformed classroom with appreciation. You've done wonders with the place. Thank you. The children arrived Monday, and I wanted everything to be perfect. She gestured to a chair. Would you like to sit? I could make some tea. Gabriel shook his head. I can't stay long. I came to say goodbye. Lillian's heart sank. You're leaving? First light tomorrow. The business is concluded, and Mr. Sundance will be expecting me back. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, uncharacteristically nervous. I wanted to make sure you were settled before I left. That's very thoughtful, Lillian said, struggling to keep her disappointment from showing. I am quite comfortable, thanks in no small part to your help. Gabriel nodded, his eyes moving around the room, anywhere but directly at her. I also wanted to return this. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, her father's pocket watch, which she hadn't even realized was missing. It must have fallen when you almost slipped from the saddle, he explained as she took it from him, their fingers brushing briefly. I found it later, but with all the commotion of arriving in town, I forgot to return it until now. Thank you, Lillian whispered, clutching the watch to her chest. It was my father's. I would have been heartbroken to lose it. Gabriel finally met her gaze, his blue eyes intense. I'm glad I could return it then. An awkward silence fell between them, filled with all the things Lillian wanted to say but couldn't find the words for. How could she express her gratitude for his kindness without revealing the deeper feelings that had taken root during their brief acquaintance? Well, Gabriel said finally, placing his hat back on his head, I should let you get back to your preparations. Good luck with your students, Miss Owens. I'm sure you'll make a fine teacher. He turned to leave, and Lillian felt a sudden panic rise in her chest. This might be the last time she ever saw him. Mr. Irving Gabriel, she called, the use of his given name stopping him at the door. Will you be passing through Snake River again? He looked back at her, a small smile playing at his lips. I reckon I might. That piece of land I mentioned, I made an offer on it today. Hope flickered in Lillian's heart. You did? Seems Snake River might be a good place to put down roots after all. His eyes held a question, one that Lillian found herself answering without words, her smile conveying what propriety wouldn't yet allow her to say aloud. "I believe it is," she replied softly. Gabriel's smile widened, genuine and warm. "In that case, Miss Owens, I'll be back before the first snow falls. Perhaps you might allow me to call on you properly then?" "I would like that very much, Mr. Irving." With a tip of his hat and a promise in his eyes, Gabriel left, the schoolhouse door closing softly behind him. Lillian stood in the empty classroom, her father's watch warm in her palm, her heart lighter than it had been in months. She moved to the window and watched as Gabriel crossed the street, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. This wasn't an ending, she realized with growing certainty. It was just the beginning. True to his word, Gabriel returned to Snake River as the first autumn leaves began to turn. He arrived not on horseback this time, but driving a wagon loaded with lumber and supplies. The land he had purchased needed a house before winter set in, and he worked from dawn to dusk each day to make it happen. In the evenings, he would call on Lillian at her quarters behind the schoolhouse, sometimes bringing small gifts, a book of poetry, wildflowers gathered from the riverbank, fresh apples from a farmer's orchard. They would sit on her small porch, talking about their days, their dreams, their pasts. As the weeks passed and the house took shape on Gabriel's land, their relationship deepened. The town watched with knowing smiles as the cowboy and the schoolteacher fell in love, their story already becoming local legend, how he had given her his horse and walked beside her when she was stranded, how fate had brought them together on that lonely trail. When the first snow dusted Snake River in early December, Gabriel led Lillian to his newly completed home, simple but sturdy, with a view of the river and mountains beyond. Inside, by the warmth of the hearth fire, he knelt and asked her to be his wife. Their wedding took place on Christmas Day in the town's little church, with Lillian's students singing carols and the entire community in attendance. Mr. Thornton gave the bride away, beaming with fatherly pride, while Mrs. Thornton dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. As Lillian and Gabriel exchanged vows, she couldn't help but think of the twist of fate that had brought them together, a dead horse on a lonely trail, a stranger's kindness, a walk to town that had changed the course of her life. Sometimes she reflected as Gabriel slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, the end of one journey was merely the beginning of another, far greater adventure. In the years that followed, the Irving Ranch prospered and their family grew. Lillian continued teaching until the birth of their first child, a son they named Thomas after her father. 2 more children would join their family, a daughter, Sarah, and another son, Benjamin. During the winter months when the ranch demanded less attention, Gabriel would sometimes visit the schoolhouse, captivating the students with tales of the open range and teaching the older boys about animal husbandry. And every summer, on the anniversary of their first meeting, Gabriel and Lillian would ride out along the trail where her horse had died, leaving wildflowers beneath the juniper tree in memory of the faithful animal whose passing had, in its own way, given them the greatest gift of all each other. Their love story became a favorite in Snake River, told and retold by those who had witnessed it unfold. A tale of kindness, sacrifice, and the unexpected ways that hearts find each other in the vast wilderness of the American West. A reminder that sometimes, in the most desperate moments when all seems lost, love appears on the horizon like a distant town, at sunset, promising shelter, warmth, and a place to call home.